Motoring 2010 on TSN is brought to you by Quaker State, real durable oil, and Michelin, a better way forward.
This week, we're going to begin by asking the question, what is wrong with these pictures? Well, you, the consumer, would answer everything, because they're minivans. And you know, Chrysler was the company that created this minivan segment. They were so hot, everybody started to build one. But today, very few car makers are still in the game simply because the minivan market is shrinking and shrinking big time. So this week, we're going to try and find out what happened to the minivan and why companies continue to build them. Companies like Honda, that is now coming out with its new and improved 2011 Odyssey.
Minivans, practical vehicle. There's a certain time in your life when you gotta have one. You hate having it, but it's like you gotta have it. You know, it's like a vasectomy. You don't want kids anymore, you better get one.
Minivans have a certain stigma attached to them. You know, they're a little bit too boxy, a little bit too generic. But we thought it's a great challenge and we can do a lot better than that.
We really want to make a vehicle that was clearly the industry leader for handling, for braking, for all of those types of activities that make it kind of a driver minivan, if you will.
Nobody wants to be a soccer mum anymore, I guess. I think that's really what's happened out there. But this vehicle is really for sophisticated people who are looking for the best. The vehicle is longer, lower, wider, center of gravity has been dropped down. People are going to love the performance and handling of this vehicle.
We have a 3.5 liter engine, which is similar to the current Odyssey, but we retuned the intake and exhaust system. We've also added a lot of friction reducing technologies to improve the engine efficiency by over 11% to give it class leading fuel economy.
You know, if you needed any proof that the minivan market has been going into the toilet, in 2005 in Canada, they sold about 175,000 minivans. Well, today, that sales total has been cut by more than a half, and that's only in 5 years. So you got to ask companies like Honda, why even bother?
You know, Brad, we've got a lot of Honda fans who love the Odyssey, and we just knew that we couldn't abandon that marketplace. There are so many people who are just waiting for the next Odyssey to come out.
I think Honda's right in saying that the minivan market is probably bottomed, and it may be half of what it used to be, but that half is still a sizable chunk of business. And so what Toyota and Honda are doing now is they're fighting for the upper end. They're fighting for the luxury end of it. Anybody who actually cares what a minivan costs is going to buy a Dodge. It's just that simple.
It definitely has a stigma. I mean, my wife's already said she won't abide by a minivan. She won't look at a minivan, and we're a perfect target demographic. I mean, mid-30s, having two young boys. So we could use the space. She can appreciate the practicality of having the sliding doors that come in and out. She loves all that. But it's just that whole stigma.
I have 3 kids, and we have owned minivans since 1995. I've worked with Honda for quite a while, and in 1995, when we started to sell the minivan, we leased the very first generation. So every 2 years, we got a new one. So by now, we are at number 7 and looking forward to number 8. As a consumer, I'm speaking as a customer, not as a designer.
They're literally the most practical vehicles on the road. This one in particular, you can take the second row seats out. The third row seats fold amazingly easy. I mean, it really is an easy vehicle to get along with.
We used the word actually unapologetic in the early stages of the project. We wanted to create a vehicle that you don't have to make excuses for. As a dad, when you show up somewhere, I just drive this because my wife took the other car, you know. We wanted a vehicle that you're proud of, and I'm driving this because it's cool.
It works. All right, they're added 4 horsepower. Nobody cares. It gets 1 liter per 100 kilometers less in terms of fuel consumption. Nobody cares. But it does have leather seats. It does have nav, and you can split the TV screen so one kid can play his video game and the other one can watch Shrek.
This car's pretty impressive as minivans go. Again, it handles very well. It's very quiet. It's a great riding car, and you can actually have some fun with it.
It's expensive. we're still going to sell, 50, 60, 70,000 of these things a year to the people that actually need them. So it's a market that's worthwhile to be in.
Hopefully I'm wrong, that we'll have minivans for years to come, but I don't know if my kids are going to be driving me around in them when I'm an old guy.
Do you know how you can tell when there's an idiot on board? A few clues later on Kenzie's Corner.
Mention Sportage and people still cringe. That's how bad the original vehicle was. On this edition of Test Drive, the latest third-generation Sportage. Now, to say this thing is a very distant relative, well, that's an understatement. When I was but a strip of a lad, well, a tad older perhaps, I tested the original Sportage. It was then and still is today one of the worst vehicles I've had the misfortune to test. The ride was choppier than the ocean in a force 9 gale, it had all the power of a golf cart going uphill, and a total lack of sophistication. One of the key improvements to this Sportage is found in the all-wheel drive system. Unlike so many of its competitors which use a slip-first, grip-later reactive system, the Sportage's all-wheel drive system is proactive, and it's that way because it not only looks at wheel speed, it also looks at throttle position. That simple fact puts it in some pretty lofty competition. Audi, BMW, Mercedes-Benz and Subaru are all highly respected because their systems are proactive. This Sportage joins that very elite list. That system and the active dampers, which change the internal valving according to the speed of the body's movement, give the Sportage a mighty boost in the handling department. There is but a couple of degrees of body roll and even less in the way of understeer, even when pushed through the pylons. One of the biggest improvements to this Sportage has to do with the way the cabin has been designed. To begin with, clean and clear uncluttered dash, the two-tier treatment of the audio and climate control systems, it adds a richness you don't expect, and the materials, very good. As for the toys, they are aplenty. Everything from power locks, windows and mirrors to a rear view camera that shows up in the mirror. Now yes, the view is a little small, but it is clear and it is useful. The one thing I do particularly like, and it's regardless of model, the USB input. If you take an iPod, download all your music onto a USB thumb drive, you plug it in here, the information shows up on the radio. The advantage? Quite simply, you leave your iPod sitting there beside the power outlet, it's going to get stolen. The likelihood of somebody breaking a window to steal a thumb drive ain't going to happen. The second place the Sportage departs from the norm is its ability to turn the front wheels by about 4 degrees using the electric steering. This action, which the driver is not aware of, is then used as the first level of electronic stability control. In essence, it steers the front wheels into an oversteer condition to correct it. As a result, when the EX's up-level 225/60R17 tyres do begin to come unglued, the active steering and electronic stability control work hand in hand to straighten things out. When it comes to utility and versatility, this new Sportage is actually pretty good. With the seats in the upright position, you get about 26 cubic feet of cargo space. If you fold them down, that number grows to about 55 cubic feet. There are some other nice touches. The wheel well intrusions have been kept to a minimum, the floor is flat, there's a privacy cover to keep prying eyes off your valuables, and there's a handy storage bin beneath the floor. Now, in an ideal world, there would be two other things. First of all, the rear glass should open independently of the tailgate, and secondly, the front seat should fold forward and flat, which will allow you to carry a longer item inside the vehicle with the tailgate closed. Sadly, it's not an ideal world. Marrying a 6-speed manumatic transmission to the Sportage's 2.4-litre 4-cylinder engine does some good things. The low first gear accentuates the 176 horsepower and 168 pound-feet of torque when pulling away, while the easygoing nature of 6th gear brings comfortable highway cruising and decent fuel economy. The hang-up is that the manual mode selects 5th gear whenever activated. It should not, because it's invariably the wrong gear. This latest Sportage really does raise the bar in the entry-level crossover segment. To begin with, it has a truly advanced electronic stability control system that actually uses the front wheels to counter oversteer. It also has a very good proactive all-wheel drive system and those semi-active dampers. Factor in a very nice cabin, and it just goes to show you what a few years and some solid engineering will do for any vehicle.
Time to update our long-term Buick Lacrosse. As I've said on earlier updates, this is not your grandpa's Buick. Looks, comfort, performance, and basic drivability are more than impressive. Now you can begin at around $31,000 for a Lacrosse, but add in some options and you can get close to $50,000. But the question you have to ask yourself is, do you need a DVD system in a sedan? Do you need a fully blown Navi system with a 40 gigabyte hard drive and a rear 120 volt outlet? But this car also comes with one of my big pet peeves, the keyless entry system with the push button start. The push button's very cool, but on most cars, if you accidentally leave the key in the car and walk away, the car remains unlocked. Or if you're Jim Kenzie, he drives to the airport, his wife drives the car home and realizes Jim, somewhere above the Atlantic Ocean, has the key. So if she turns the car off, she can't restart it. However, the guys at GM were thinking, because if I get out of this car and accidentally leave the keys behind and close the door and walk away, somebody is thinking. However, it would not help Jim Kenzie, because if the engine continues to run when you leave the car with the key fob, it will not give you a warning. It's not idiot-proof. However, this system, as Bill Gardner likes to say, is the answer to the question that was never asked.
What are we doing on motoring?
We've got a special coming up, dummy.
Well, if that's the case, we better head to the liquor store.
Earlier we saw some Honda Odysseys being put through some rather aggressive driving in the parking lot at the home of the San Diego Chargers. Now, you ever wonder what happens to these vehicles after the media is finished with them? Well, in this particular case, these Odysseys are pre-production, so they will be crushed and recycled. So breathe a sigh of relief. They won't end up in a showroom near you. All right, now let's head to the Quaker State Garage. Join Bill Gardner.
Hey Brad, you know my motto, drive it forever. We're not going to crush it and recycle it until there's absolutely nothing left, okay? What we've got here today is our cameraman, Pete McCallum. He's got a 02 Hyundai Elantra with 271,000 K on it, so we're getting up into high kilometers, certainly up in that realm of believability of any kind of a mechanical problem on a vehicle. And it doesn't matter what brand of car you've got, when you're getting up in the high mileage, you're going to get problems. The problem with this car was that you'd start the engine up and it would run at 4,000 RPM with your foot right off the throttle, not even touching the throttle, 4,000 RPM. Now, you put that car into gear, if it was an automatic, you'd get a wicked clunk. This one's a 5-speed standard. You're having to slip the clutch to take off at that high RPM. So it's just not good for the car. It's bad for drivability. It's a safety issue because obviously it wants to take off on you, and it's got to be fixed. Now, the situation here, what's happened is the intake manifold gasket, which is this part here, this is the new one that's going to go in this car. The vacuum or suction of the engine has actually sucked in a couple of areas. The engine has ingested or sucked in the intake manifold gasket, and there's a couple of pieces actually missing. So what we've got now is we've got unauthorized air or a major vacuum leak into the engine. And on an electronically controlled engine, which is pretty much everything built since the mid-80s, when you get a major vacuum leak, you get a really high idle speed because the engine management system will add the amount of fuel that would go with that unauthorized air that's coming in through the vacuum leak. So you add the extra air and the extra fuel, really high idle speed. Okay, so we've got a transverse 4-cylinder engine here. On the back side of the cylinder head, we've got the intake manifold. That's this large aluminum chunk right here. This is our throttle body right here. You can see the throttle blade in there, and when it's closed, there's the rest position, that's idle. There's part throttle, a little more throttle, and there's wide open throttle. All the air entering the engine passes by the throttle blade, and this is what we control with our right foot when we step on the gas. Now, I've taken all the fasteners off this intake manifold, and I've removed all the hardware connected to it, and the manifold will come out of there fairly straightforward. And I just fumbled the gasket down in behind the engine, so we'll have to fish it out. But there's our failed manifold gasket. There's where it goes. There's the missing piece that's causing us the major vacuum leak and the high idle speed. That's on cylinder 2. You can see cylinder 3 starting to get the same problem. It's cracked the gasket there, and it's bunched it up here, and it's started to suck this portion in as well. So this little inexpensive gasket's going to have to go in the garbage, and we're going to replace it with this new one. This is a pretty simple deal to fix, and with the new gasket in there and these mating surfaces cleaned up, this thing's going to idle just fine. Our engine speed will be back under control. But you know what? If you ever get in a situation with your car with a runaway engine speed, you want to keep your head cool and take evasive action. Now that's sometimes easier said than done because it's pretty disconcerting when the engine won't throttle back. Now in the case of this car with a standard transmission, declutching, tranny into neutral, you can slow it down, get it safely over to the side of the road. Don't shut the key off because you want to keep your power steering and power brakes. If the car's an automatic, you're riding the brake down to keep the speed down, bump it into neutral. Don't touch the key, don't shut it off. You want those power steering and power brakes, get it safely over to the side of the road. Then you shut it off, get it towed in, and get it fixed. Now, if this happened on ice or snow-covered roads, you know, it could be a bit of a tense situation. So you want to quickly get it bumped into neutral so that you've taken the drive away and get it safely over the side of the road, get it towed in, and get it fixed. It's a pretty simple deal. Not the end of the world, and you don't have to crush it and recycle it. Till next week, I'm Bill Gardner for Motoring 2010.
You know, this week we've been looking at some of the reasons why the minivan market is shrinking, but a bit of a surprise is that in North America, including Canada, trucks are now outselling cars.
It's tough to figure out, Brad. You know, of course, when the price of fuel went crazy, people were abandoning big trucks and big vehicles and moving to hybrids and small vehicles in droves. But the minute the price of fuel dropped, everybody went back to their old habits. So I really shake my head that people can be so swayed by the price of fuel and react so quickly.
When gasoline was at $4.35, we were told that we had completely misplanned our business. We should have seen this coming. We stupidly insisted on building the full-size trucks and sport utilities that the American public desperately wanted to buy. And now all of a sudden we're back down to $1.50. Hybrids are just about sales-proof. Small cars are sales-proof. And the dealers say, please don't send us any more Chevrolet Cobalts, but please do send us some more Silverado pickup trucks and Tahoes. So, I mean, we cannot engage in long-term business or product planning in an environment like that. I think one of the critical elements in the future of the North American automobile industry is the absence of any sort of energy policy. An energy policy which encourages the consumer to buy the fuel-efficient vehicles which we are now designing and building and which are basically mandated by law.
Closed captioning of Motoring 2010 is brought to you by the most fuel-efficient crossover on the highway, the all-new Chevy Equinox.
Now, governments go to great lengths to protect ourselves from ourselves, and fair enough, I guess that's part of the job. And one of the things they make car makers do is build 8-kilometer-an-hour proof bumpers so that you can smash into a car at a reasonable fender bender speed and not break the taillights or destroy the fuel tank or whatever. And that's all well and good. But then they allow you to go to an accessory store and buy something like that. I mean, if I'm in my Miata, this thing's hitting my windshield before I get to this guy's bumper. And if a bicyclist or a motorcyclist turns past this guy and doesn't know this thing's hanging out there, they're going to get decapitated by that thing. And of course, it's fitted to a huge trailer hitch, this great massive chunk of steel down there, that completely destroys the purpose of having a crash-proof bumper in the first place. It doesn't make any sense. And speaking of things people add to their cars, how about these things they hang off of their rear view mirror? The baby shoes. Baby shoes, come on. The CD, well, that's the worst, because that not only gets in the way of the driver's vision, it dazzles everybody else when the sunlight catches it. And of course, there's the religious medallions and the crosses and whatnot. Listen, if God is supposed to be all-knowing, chances are he knows you're on his team. You don't have to hang it in your windshield to tell everybody else. Now, the one advantage is, I suppose, because it's distracting your vision, you're more likely to have a crash, and maybe you're going to get a little nearer thy God to thee. But the best thing, of course, are the bumper stickers. Yes, my kid is an honor student, or my kid can beat up your honor student, and the best of all, baby on board. Like, I need to know you've got a baby on board? No, you need to know you've got a baby on board. Put that sticker on your dashboard and remind yourself you've got your own flesh and blood in the car. And maybe it'll start making you drive like an adult. I'm Jim Kenzie.
As you may have gathered, I'm a big fan of minivans, and now I'm a fan of the 2011 Honda Odyssey. I like its styling, good drivability. I'm really impressed with its turning radius, which is important with a vehicle of this size. And when it comes to comfort, lots of bells and whistles. Of course, its biggest competition is the Sienna. My advice is drive them both. They're that close. Now, will they sell? Well, car companies like to say that baby boomers who spawned this segment are the reason for its demise. Well, I disagree. As for the Generation X, they're going to have their kids, we know that. But when it comes to the boomers, many of them are now retiring. Along with some disposable income, they want to hop in a car and go on a vacation and also get some good fuel economy. So the question is, which vehicle do you pick when you got 4 adults, luggage, and a couple of sets of golf clubs? Well, to me, the answer is simple: the minivan. I rest my case. Before we go, make sure you check out our website and Facebook for the total motoring experience. That's it for now. We'll see you next time out as we continue to bring you more stories about cars and the people who drive them.
The segment is kind of boring, and I include in that our previous Sonata. Pretty milquetoast kind of segment. I guess people thought that families didn't really want an exciting, dynamic-looking vehicle. Well, we've brought that to the segment with our new Sonata.
Motoring 2010 on TSN has been brought to you by Quaker State, Real Durable Oil, and Michelin, a better way forward.